there has been some word behind the scene that an edict has been thrown down by CEO of Disney, Bob Iger. And that edict is this date that we have reserved now for the last year of Christmas 2025 had better be met for the Star Wars movie. And for those of you that don't know, when these studios and distributors, when they start developing big projects like this with, kind of at that Marvel, Star Wars, DC, big franchise projects, they book these things out years in advance. There has for some time been booked with theaters out there a December 2025 untitled Star Wars project. Disney seems hell-bent on having that, especially now with Iger back, hell-bent on meeting that deadline. Like, they don't want to pull that date, or they don't want to have it substituted with Haunted Mansion 7 or some crap like that. They seem intent on getting a Star Wars film in that slot like they originally intended, and the gauntlet has been thrown down. We had this news, the most recent bit of news, with Damon Lindleof was going to get a project, and he was writing a script for it. And this Damon Lindleof project was then met with Kathleen Kennedy going out and hiring, unbeknownst to Damon Lindleof, as so the story goes, the director, or the showrunner rather, of Ms. Marvel on Disney Plus. Whoopee. Everybody get excited. And that's not to knock the show at all. I'm really not. But the fact of the matter is that this showrunner for that show has basically no credentials worthy of taking on a major 200, which obviously it's absolutely going to be a $250, $300 million production for a movie like this, a Star Wars theatrical piece they're going to go forward with. No credentials to do this. And I see it looks like, Tom, you shared something in the back. Let me, that's probably...
Well, I don't know if it's relevant to this time yet, but...
Oh, yes. No, this... I love this. Thank you, Tom. Thank you. That's perfect. And this is what I'm talking about. This is a list. Tom, why don't you go through this? Y'all talk about this. I need about 5 minutes. I'll be right back. Family just got home. Go ahead.
This is basically what I refer to whenever I say that Kathleen Kennedy has fired more people than she's hired. Is your audio working? I think Nick just can't hear me.
No, Nick, we can hear him.
Oh, I don't understand. Yeah,
there we go.
Can't
all
hear me.
All right, now I can hear you.
I think it's just you, Nick.
Can hear me. Yeah.
That's weird.
Yeah, so this is what I've been saying when I say that Kathleen Kennedy has fired more people than she's hired. And some people laugh at me and say that doesn't make sense. And that you show them something like this, and it makes complete sense. Because we've only had 2 Star Wars projects that actually happened without any problems. And that was The Force Awakens and Last Jedi. And even The Force Awakens, we had heard later on that JJ and Kathy had butt heads quite often. But there's actually more things that can be added to this list now. So we'll get to those. But as you may recall, Rogue One didn't go without a hitch because Gareth Edwards got the boot and Tony Gilroy come in and took over for him. We've had at least Josh Trank and James Mangold attached to other Boba Fett projects in the past. Lord Miller, of course, got let go from Solo after 88 days. Colin Trevorrow, of course, originally wrote Duel of the Fates, a.k.a. The Rise of Skywalker, and got booted. Then we have the Benioff and Weiss problem, and they got booted from their trilogy. Stephen Daldry was also supposed to be working on Obi-Wan, and he got booted. Let's see. We got Patty Jenkins, which I think that project was canceled before it even got announced. J.D. Dillard also was working on a project that got canceled. And then, of course, most recently, we have the Kevin Feige and Michael Waldron project that's been canceled. And the one that we're talking about right now, which is the Damon Lindleof and Justin Britt-Gibson one. And I'll be honest with you, unless it was a work for hire on Lindelof's part, whatever the script this Stephen DeKnight is working on, if it's his own original idea, it's a completely different project with just the same director. Let's be real, because they were pitching this as the Lindelof project to begin with. And then we learned about, of course, we could add Rian Johnson's trilogy to this if you really wanted to. I mean, it's only been reportedly dead, 5 times now? But there's another project that we just learned about. I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but there was another one that's not even on this list. Are you guys familiar with the name David Gordon Green at all?
I'm not.
All right.
I don't even know who that is.
You are familiar with the new Halloween films, right?
Oh,
Halloween Ends, Halloween Kills, all that stuff. Well, David Gordon Green is the director of those.
Oh, okay.
And he's now working on the new Exorcist reboots. Well, in between there, he actually was working on a Star Wars project.
I'd never heard that.
But as soon as Halloween Ends bombed, he got let go. Whose MO does that sound like?
It sounds like the vast majority of the people on this list. I mean, especially Benioff and Weiss. Like after that final season of Game of Thrones, they just mysteriously were canceled. Boom, canceled. And along with Lord and Miller, what was it? Like 80% of the movie was done, and then they were canceled. Boom, canceled. It's just one right after another. Like even a lot of the shill channels or people that are considered Disney shills are literally making Lucasfilm a complete joke right now. They're even calling it out at this point, and I don't know how you couldn't.
Tom, do you have any other details about that project? Because I haven't heard anything about this. And given this guy's horror background, I'm wondering what kind of a tone they were going for.
Yeah, actually, I just heard about this, I believe it was last night, and I brought this to Valiant's attention late last night. He's like, what? I didn't hear about that. Yeah, I guess David Gordon Green himself. I'm trying to find the story here. I had it handy, and then, of course, I lost it. So I have it here somewhere here. I'm trying to bring it up here. Especially since Valiant's gone, I'm going to try and bring it up in the same screen. See, I think I sent it to Andre, so let me look there.
Well, what was it going to be, like a Star Wars horror film?
I don't know. Well, and the funny thing is David Gordon Green, I think traditionally has been more of a comedic director, because he had worked with the guy from Eastbound and Down. Jeez, I can't remember his name now. The comedic actor.
The thing that this kind of makes me wonder is that there have been those rumors about whenever we get to, I think it's probably Skeleton Crew or maybe something related to Ezra, they were talking about having this Thrawn story where you have them meeting what looked like the progenitors of the Night Sisters in the main part of the galaxy. And there was supposed to be a horror element to that. So I'm wondering if this had something to do with that.
Yeah, and basically Danny McBride, that's what I was trying to think of. So this guy worked with Danny McBride on the new Halloween film, and I think traditionally they had worked on comedy, right? So like that was kind of a turn for them. But according to this from himself, he said, I'm told that before Halloween Kills came out, this comes from Snyder, Jeff Snyder at the Hot Mic. He said, I was told that before Halloween Kills came out, David Gordon Green was trying to get a Star Wars movie off the ground. I'm told that David Gordon Green, this is speculative, I've heard that he regrets signing on to do an Exorcist trilogy straight after a Halloween trilogy to do 6 franchise horror movies for a guy who is, by the way, David Gordon Green, who's hopped around from Snow Angels to George Washington. You can't pin him down with a genre. Don't know if he's loved getting caught up in this horror cycle for the last decade. Would it shock me if David Gordon Green didn't direct 2 and 3 of the Exorcist sequels? It wouldn't shock me. I've heard that the script for number 2 has already been turned in, and they've wrapped production on the first one. I would be personally surprised if David did 2 and 3, and I don't think his Star Wars movie is happening. That felt like a non-starter, particularly given how poorly these Halloween sequels seem to go over. So yeah, it kind of sounds like that's the case here, is what happened was he was working on something, and then as soon as Halloween Ends failed, or he got too wrapped up in The Exorcist, and then he got the boot with the rest of these other projects that got the boot. But funnily enough, this was one we never even had heard about, right? Like this was out of nowhere.
This sounds like it never even got into pre-production. He was just kind of signed on to develop whatever was going to come next, and it just never got anywhere.
Another list of a development that went nowhere for Lucasfilm. I mean,
boom, canceled.
This has been the stock story for years now with LFL, and
that's why I believe it, right, Valiant? Because it sounds just like what Nick was saying every other time. Anytime somebody hits like some kind of speed bump, Kathleen Kennedy distanced themselves from instantly. Like Benioff and Weiss, all that kind of crap. Same thing.
Yeah. And it always comes Trank down to creative differences, scheduling conflicts, all this crap, which I would like to be a fly on the wall, because I guarantee you they're pushing the message / agenda to these people, and they're like, I'm not doing that. This is going to be a complete shit show. And then when they give pushback and they don't cave, They're basically like, look, I can't do this. And they're like, okay, well, we'll find somebody that will. And then they exit the project.
Right. They're not turning in the kind of scripts or the stories that, and we can presume at this point in many cases that Kathleen Kennedy didn't like, which is to say that they were probably better than what we suppose they were, because her credentials in that department are lacking. Let's just say that. You know?
This is why they're in such a terrible spiral right now, and why Star Wars desperately needs one creative visionary who's guiding the story. The problem that they have is they went after all of these hot directors or hot writers. They've fired most of them or let them go. Now you're having to scrape kind of the lesser tier directors and writers, and they're not necessarily eager to jump into this either. They're using them mostly as figureheads for a committee that's pushing the story forward.
Yeah, and there was one director. It was either director or writer. I can't remember. It might have been the director for Top Gun Maverick. Valiant or Tom, you guys might know who I'm talking about.
Yeah, I think that's who it was, and I think that's what I was going to say is, where he had said that he does not even want to work for them because of the problems they have over there. Basically.
Yes. Somebody asked him in an interview if they would ever do a Star Wars movie or a Lucasfilm, and they basically said, hell no, I'm not going over there. Like, basically saying that it's just pretty much a mess over there, and there's no way they would put themselves into that situation.
Yeah, they put themselves in a situation where it's almost impossible to attract talent now. What you almost need to do is take somebody who's relatively unknown but hungry, give them maybe a smaller budget, like the kind of thing that Lucas used to have to work against to force them to focus on the story. And then if it's successful, say, hey, let's see if this guy can do something else. You've got to somehow give somebody that shot, let him take a shot at the brass ring, and then see where it goes.
Yeah, indeed. And Lorn, to your point, this is not just about a spiral for Star Wars as a storytelling enterprise, right? This has been a spiral, and this is what we like to cover here. Because where the rubber meets the road is with the money. And Star Wars has been spiraling downward for years now from a money perspective. And the money precedes everything else out there. I mean, again, like we mentioned earlier, Lorn, when you can't get in a movie, a major theatrical release, into pre-production since 2016 or 2017, from when The Rise of Palpatine went into pre-production, there's been nothing since then that has gone from a development phase into an actual let's get this greenlit and put into principal photography phase. That's a massive problem. That's a black eye for Robert Iger, and I think that's what he's most pissed off about. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why, like we've talked about before, Iger doesn't even really mention Kathleen Kennedy in his memoirs. It basically pans her. Just like Steven Spielberg and Richard Donner and George Lucas over the years, with the exception of Lucas obviously regretting to this point naming her as his successor from the business management side of Lucasfilm when it was sold to Disney.
Other than selling it, that was the second worst decision that he's ever made in his life.
Renegade.